So you mentioned these standards that are under development for functional safety and for intended functionality. How does ethics come into play there? And I'm thinking of the Moral Machine project of the MIT, because moral is very differently defined in every country, in every culture, in every demographic group. So how are these intended to be baked into this intended functionality? Because ethical behavior of autonomous vehicles is somewhat also functionality of these assistance systems.
This is very interesting and it is very severe, but this is tight, very close to the legal discussion. Because ethics is one point and legal is the one you may get punished if something goes wrong. Ethics must be discussed, but it can't go directly into these into the algorithms. Maybe you have heard of the Ethics Commission that has been set into commission about 2 years ago. It worked for about 9 months, and there was a 20-sheet paper that gave us some handy ideas to go into that direction. And to my belief, you should take this result seriously and take this maybe into all of your work. But this will not be easy because there are the economic pressures maybe in the development. And of course there are the legal cases. So you have to stick directly to the legal character, and this will take into account usually all ethics questions after a few times. And you mentioned that also it's a matter of culture. So if we talk about that in Germany, we will have different results. When we talk in USA, in Japan, or the Far East somewhere, we will probably have different results.
So for Europe, that's an interesting case of hopefully having unified law over the EU, but still having different ethics in every country or even in every region.
That's it.
And it somewhat also implies kind of a regional version of each code, because of course you have to comply with certain regulations, not only for road safety, but also have this moral aspect. And
that's it. And there are some interesting cases from this study Rolf just mentioned that has been heavily discussed, that when you have to decide between a 3-year-old child and an 80-year-old woman, how do you decide? What do you think?
That was actually part of the Moral Machine project. And their finding was that it is vastly different between, for example, Asian countries who would always protect the elderly compared to, who would always protect the elderly compared to Western and US, America countries, who will always protect the younger ones. So that is exactly this legal differentiation.
Absolutely. So this discussion also came in this report Rolf just mentioned, and there are also cases. So when you're a victim of such an autonomous driving accident, then you definitely are against it. However, if you look at the bigger picture, if Rolf mentioned that there are 3,500 people dying in Germany, and with the application of autonomous vehicle, the idea is to reduce this number. When in a pure number you can reduce death in the street, you should go for it. But again, from the victim's perspective, that's not okay. Once you're, even if it's 500, as long as you're the victim, you're never going to. So ethical issue is a thing that's just hard to imagine on. On that note, I want to welcome the new panelist, the next speaker. Mario, why don't you join the talk a little bit? You have a very
maybe I'll take this one.
Radical standpoint on these issues. So what do you think?
But on this issue?
Yeah.
Not a really radical one.
Sure.
I was always wondering why should you put that burden on a software developer? I would just throw dices.
I fully agree with you. Here is my point. Here's my point, Myra. Thank you for bringing it up. If the the surgeon, the open heart surgeon, has to take the liability of making a mistake, he will never go to the operation room. So if you give the liability to the software developer, we will make mistakes. There is no way he will be programming, right? I mean, this is a good point, Rolf.
Maybe let me jump in here. So I mean, you can definitely not make the point that the developer can do whatever the developer wants to do.
That's
so the
not the point.
Developer has a responsibility. Plus, the interesting thing with the question is that we can only decide about it because technology enables us to decide about it. Because what happens now was someone is driving and the someone is deciding with the head, and the someone is as fast or as slow as the someone can be. So it's non-deterministic. At least we cannot know how the determinism works there. With the autonomous car, we know it because we programmed it, we created it, and this is the dimension that makes the problem interesting, because no one cares. I mean, if I'm driving and I hit either the 81-year-old woman or the 3-year-old other person, well, I mean, that I just took a decision, no one cares about it. But with the other thing, it's that someone before being in the situation would have had to think about it and would have had to decide about what will happen there. And I mean, your algorithm might exactly be what happens in my head in that moment in the end. So it's just a random decision.
No,
yes.
not exactly. Because as long as it is deterministic, I agree. But as I mentioned, the artificial intelligence, we don't know what will happen. It's non-deterministic.
But in the brain, we also don't know.
It's probable.
Right.
And so therefore, it's like...
That's it, yeah.
And also, like, I mean, it's not that we don't know what happens in the machine learning. I mean, we can exactly explain every step, but the problem is it's probabilistic.
It's probabilistic. It's actually even more complicated. Probabilistic. With probability, you can check the functional safety part. But when it comes to an external attack, that's not probabilistic anymore. That is absolutely unforeseeable. When someone will attack, what is the probability of attack? This is where you cannot even put any maths anymore.
That's right.
Right. So this takes the problem to another.
And also indeed opens another dimension, because I mean, for this security direction, I mean, there it's probably unquestioned that we should provide the highest security level that we can provide to prevent such things. And so I think it's two dimensions, but it's also good that you mention it, because it's another thing that comes in with these always interconnected entities that are not only like the car connecting with an infrastructure or with other cars, but also the control units within the car communicating with each other, probably coming from different vendors. And so today we still have like manufacturers that are creating these cars, and they hopefully checked them to a certain extent. Maybe in the future we'll have also something more modular in that thing, or we have software updates, which is also a very interesting aspect. So this is also something that didn't start too long ago. The people started putting software updates into cars and into control units and so on. And it's not even happening with everything right now, but it's of course very attractive for developers, because then they can fix it once it's shipped. And so this is also an interesting development. And the more we put the things into the... So yeah, let me also bring this dimension. So the interesting thing is also, we'll think 10 years back. So back then, software development happened inside this computer. So the worst thing you could harm was like inside your screen. And so now we bring these multi-ton cars or robots in manufacturing or whatever, and they are controlled by software. So we have these cyber physical systems. And so this is interesting, because it's not depending on the physics anymore, but on what we programmed into the code.